Buzz Live. Buzz, 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 buzz. It's Blake's Buzz Live. Buzz, 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 buzz. It's Blake's Buzz Live. More, hate less, read comics. It's Blake's Buzz Live.
Buzz, buzz, babies.
Hey, Buzz babies. It's weird going live when the sun is still out, but you know, when you got a guest like we do today, you make special things happen, and I'm so stoked. But before we get to that, I've got a real quick announcement. As you all know, I've been talking about, I'm the social media manager for Metal Ninja Studios, and we are doing the Trample IH Challenge. That's intracranial hypertension. We're trying to raise money for the Intracranial Hypertension Research Foundation because it's it's a hard disease to treat. They don't have a lot of patients. They need money to help do more research so they can better treat the people that are diagnosed with it. And my boss, Joel Rodriguez, who owns Metal Ninja Studios, he is doing the 4x4x48 challenge. And basically it's a exercise invented by a Navy SEAL, and he is going to run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. And he's doing this to raise awareness for the cause. And I'm going to post a link in the chat so you guys can check that out. We've got some exclusive merch, or you can go to the site, you can donate directly. And if things are tight right now, if you can't buy merch or donate, you know what? Sharing helps immensely. So if you guys could check that out, that would be awesome. Please remember, sharing is caring and caring is fun. My grade school teacher used to say that, and you know what? She was right. Now, without further ado, the guest I have today is one of the iconic Daredevil scribes, has written Catwoman, has written Katana, is currently writing a new Captain Marvel and Storm series at Marvel. The always amazing Annie Nocenti is in the house. Annie, how are you doing today?
Hi. I like that I have a little bee over my head.
Well, it's good. We're off to the races then. If you like bees, you're gonna like the buzz. It's kind of I still don't really know how it happened. Someone told me I was busy like a bee when I was writing tons of reviews a while back, and then it all changed into this madness.
Well, I was able to when I wrote the graphic novel The Seeds, of course, it's drenched in bees. I give bees all kinds of intelligence and foresight and prescience that they probably don't have, but you know.
But I mean, they have a lot of power, like in nature, right? Like, I mean, without bees, without pollination, like everything kind of like falls apart. I remember, several years ago when they thought like the bees were dying off, and that was like one of the new ways that human beings were going to ruin the planet, right? Because
the bees are dying off. They're still dying off.
Yeah,
so it's basically there'd be without pollinators, we'd have a lot of trouble in our food chain. And really, like this new thing they're saying, no mow May, is kind of important. Like everybody wants their lawns really like military crew cut lawns.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just let your lawn be a little wild with wildflowers, that helps the bees. So
I haven't heard of that. I didn't know that was going on.
Oh yeah. Because the lawn is kind of an import that was, I don't know, people got into it as a way to say they were wealthy because rich people had lawns, and they're actually really bad for the environment. So there's more and more people are not mowing, and they're not fertilizing, and they're letting the indigenous plants take over, like moss and wildflowers, because it's important, because the more lawn you have, the sicker your planet is.
Wow. I had no idea about that. That's crazy. My dog would love it if we let it grow and get crazy. He loves
it. Let it grow, let it get crazy. It's much better for the environment, for bees, for pollinators, for and it's the reason that we have them goes back to it being a status symbol for wealth, and no one even remembers that. So
yeah, I just know, like growing up, it was just like my dad and his parents used to be like real crazy about the lawn, like, and they would like stress out about it if it got too tall, and it was just like I always, when they like made me mow as a kid, I have bad allergies, so I would like mow, and then I would be like half dead for 2 days, like coughing up all sorts of stuff, and
grass is artificial. It doesn't do any, you can't eat it. It doesn't do anything for us. You have to fertilize it. It's, it's pointless.
Wow. So
So,
is it this kind of like, this like bit of like ecological knowledge, like is that kind of like, kind of segueing back to bees, back to seeds, is that kind of where you and David came up with this idea?
Well, I've always had a lot of friends that were beekeepers, and so my beekeeper friends were the ones who were telling me hives are dying, bees are leaving, and I learned from farmers and beekeepers that you don't want, that the lawn is an artificial, pointless thing that you just have to keep dumping fertilizer on, and people have anxiety all the time, like you said, about keeping it short, and it's just pointless. So it's like, it's weird. It became really popular in the 50s, but I would say in the future we're not going to have grass lawns.
Wow. That's so interesting. Like I can't wait to tell my dad about this and have him tell me that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, you can research it. A lot of people writing about it.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
so that's sort of, gets to, if there are any young writers out there that want to make comics, one of the things that you do is you just kind of follow your obsessions. So, with me, it was just like my beekeeper friends worrying about bees leaving. And then I started to study bees and found out how important they were. And then I looked at how there are certain insects that communicate with each other, and we don't know how. How do ants and bees, and how do they all seem to know how to suddenly, let's swarm? Hey, let's swarm together. So there's a lot of metaphors for the bits and bytes of computers and for AI. So I think that the intelligence networks of insects are, and of a lot of animals and mushrooms that we don't know much about. There's a lot of those metaphors are being used now when people talk about AI, because
wow.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a decentralized communication network.
Because yeah, termites have a similar phenomenon too, right? The way like the queen is, it's almost like the way people talked about it, it's almost like mind control. They don't really get like how they organize their hives and stuff, but they do. There's just
they all do it. Yeah. I mean, it's in the future and I'll probably be long dead, but someday they'll figure out how it is that all these insects perform organized labor and how they communicate.
Do you think, like, I kind of worry about that though? Like, do you think if they figure that out, we'll use it on each other? Like, you turn us into drones? Like,
well, I think it's more that I don't think that's true, but I do know that there was that famous story about the fungus that took over an ant and got the ant to do its bidding. If you just Google zombie fungus, I think it was called, and I think they even made a horror movie out of it. Like when they find something in nature that is weird, they turn it into a horror movie. So your thinking is correct, but it's a horror movie.
well, that's good. Now, if it does happen sooner than later, if we find the answer to this like riddle of nature, any possibility of like you and David getting back together, doing like a seed sequel, if the inspiration like that popped up?
It was a 4-issue thing, and we kind of love it. Like like you love a child, you launch out into the world, and you don't necessarily want to clone it. I mean, it is what it is. And, I've been enjoying going back to Marvel to write, especially empowered female characters, of course, and Storm having weather powers. It's been interesting to me because her adversary in that comic is someone who also controls the weather, but he controls the weather in kind of disturbing ways. He amplifies, like there's in the first issue, she's making rain and he turns it into giant hailstones that can smash your car.
Yeah.
And then she's making a whirlwind, which is a natural thing in nature, and he turns it into a fire tornado. And then I was reading about how in the Pliocene era, I don't know how to spell that or really say it, but when the world was hotter, when the earth was too hot for humans yet,
Mhm.
there were tornadoes of fire. Like a fire
Wow.
tornado is a thing that exists only in hot places. So as we have global warming, or as the planet's heating up, we might actually start seeing fire tornadoes.
Oh my goodness. That's insane. So like tornadoes terrify me because now the area I live in South Kansas City, we had like historically this huge massive tornado like came through the old neighborhood in like the 40s or 50s, and it like there was this Ruskin Heights high school that we live next to, and they rebuilt it. They rebuilt a lot of the neighborhood because the tornado just annihilated everything. But it supposedly knocked this whole high school on its side, and the letters fell off the building. And instead of Ruskin Heights, it left ruin hits. And there's like there's like old newspaper clippings and stuff of it.
Oh,
But yeah,
that's great.
yeah, but they've always they've always freaked me out. I've never seen one, but I mean, in the Midwest we get a lot of warnings. And it's funny going back to the lawn talk. We don't live in the best neighborhood, right? So the idea of having a nice lawn is a status, and like a shit neighborhood, right, is kind of funny. But we don't have a basement; we have a crawl space, and I'm pretty sure that anything creepy crawly in that crawl space would probably kill me as easy as a tornado would trying to get down there like in an emergency. So it's always freaked us out because it's like where do we go if there's another big one? Like we're just gonna sit here.
Well, to kind of bring it back to comics, it's and I mean, I'm a natural teacher. I used to teach film in Haiti, and I've taught a lot. It's whatever your obsessions are, put them in a comic.
Nice.
Because the great thing about the whole notion, I mean, comics are magic. They're really sci-fi, really. They're sci-fi adventure stories. So sci-fi is just fiction that is based in science. So if you study the world around you and you study real things, and then you want to make a point by exaggerating, that's kind of one of the keys to making a sci-fi comic. So that's kind of what we did with The Seeds. And, it's one of my favorite books that I've ever done. And it, so in terms of like writing comics, there's that. And then Ruby Falls, which was the other Burger book I did, really came out of like a town I like, where the miners were mining limestone, and to make like a lot of the bridges, and the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty, and in the early days of a mining town, and how deep the mines went and what kind of secrets could be in the mines. So it's kind of like take something real, let your imagination go crazy, and you have a comic.
I like that. I'll remember that. I just recently I got into an anthology, so I got a 2-page short in an anthology. I've done like my first script, which writing 2 pages was really hard, like to tell like an actual story with an arc, and something happens, and it was very tricky, but it was really exciting, and I got to experience that phenomenon that a lot of the creators have told me about, where you wake up to an email with like beautiful art in your inbox, and you get to see like your script turned into these absolutely gorgeous visual panels. And so it's definitely something that I want to feel that again. I want to experience that again. But that's an exciting way to go about it.
With Captain Marvel, who I'm working with, Paolo Villanelli, who is an Italian artist. And that feeling that you just said of you open your email box and there's pages from Paolo Villanelli, it's so exciting because he is superb.
Yeah, it's a pretty book.
Artist. And I don't think the world of superheroes has quite knows about him yet. He mostly was doing Star Wars stuff and some independent stuff.
Okay.
And I think that this Captain Marvel story is really going to put him on the map because it's stunning. His work is stunning.
Yeah, it's the segueing into your new book, Captain Marvel. Actually, real quick, I just we got some people wanting to say hi in the chat. So I just want to let we got coming from Australia. Ronan just woke up. Thanks for checking out the show, bud. Tim is one of your biggest fans, and he was bummed he had to work today, but he's going to watch it later. He just finished his collection. He's got every issue of Daredevil ever published. Like he just finally like got all the previous issues and stuff. So his collection is complete. But he's one of those people where anytime someone wants to know where to start reading Daredevil, he always drops. He's like, you got to read Annie's Run. You got to read Annie's Run. And he wasn't wrong. He led me in the right direction. John Westoff, thanks for tuning in. Says every show should have B talk. I agree. And three good nerds says Storm is an amazing character, so much more than a mutant who can control the weather. Yeah, and her complexity is really you really put at the forefront of that new series.
She's well, the series essentially explores what if she lost her powers. And years ago, working with Chris Claremont, he always used to talk about how she came from this long line of sorcerers in her. She has like ancient sorcery ancestors, but because she got the mutant gene and found out, she can control weather, she's never really explored her sorcery magic genetic ancestry, which I think they're doing finally now, maybe in the current books, because Chris was always wanting to play with it and always alluding to it, but who are you without your powers is really a basic comic book idea and theme. And so she steps up to lead the X-Men. Cyclops is off on his honeymoon, with the Jean Grey lookalike Madeline Pryor. And the idea that Storm has to take over as leader, I had to sort of come up with what is her leadership style. And her leadership style is to kind of a chess player. So they're taking on the Brotherhood. And so she makes sure that she matches each power level to power level. And she has Wolverine do a bait and switch so that two of the characters come after him but actually smash into each other. And so she sets up a kind of a chess game. And then when she confronts this villain in the series that is taking her power to a level that she can't control, she has to give up leadership, and she passes the leadership to Wolverine. And Wolverine, of course, is not a chess player, he's not a strategist. He's just like, get mad and attack,
Yeah.
So it's really fun. So the third issue is Logan as the team leader, and so it really functions so that you kind of miss Storm because you realize he's just a brawler. The other thing is that people back then, he still had his what they used to call berserker rage. Like they were always like, Wolverine, he's gone into his berserker rage, and it was the idea of literally of when someone sees red and they fight further than their logical mind should let them fight when you see red if you're in a brawl. And I think that when he got his, because this is also before he had his adamantium skeleton, because it takes place before that miniseries. So, he was still a berserker rage guy. So,
wow.
So you add that, so a little bit of nostalgia for that,
I really love what you're doing with Storm. I'm not used to seeing a vulnerable Aurora. Like she's very complex, right? And I've seen moments with her, you know, when things happen and her like claustrophobia kicks in, right? But this is more like longer form, and you know, having her, you know, not like you said, like she's got the powers, but she can't really control them, and to lead the X-Men and to set an example when you can't control your own powers while you're trying to, you know, control your teammates, right? There's this element of like like this messy element of like a not strong leader, which is goes against everything we know currently about Storm. And what prompted this? Like where did this, like, did you pitch this? Did they reach out to you to like go back? And
from Mark Basso and Drew, the assistant editor, they just called me up and said, do you want to do Punk Storm? And the weird thing is that when I was making comics, like when I was writing Daredevil, I was in New York City, right down the road from CBGB's, where the punk scene was. So I remember when Paul Smith redesigned Storm to be a punk, it was kind of a fashion change for the fun of it. It made sense in that she had just beaten Callisto and the Morlocks Underground, and Callisto already had that kind of punk look, the leathers, the leather vests, the leather pants, the boots, the crazy hair. And so, but Storm actually got the mohawk. So it was kind of like, why? You know, why would you take on a punk look if you aren't in a punk band? You know, or at least a fan of a punk. Like, you know, you'd go to CBGB's and you'd see, like, you know, Iggy Pop, and the audience was filled with people that were, you know, they had the safety pins holding their clothes together and the mohawks, which took a mohawk. Like, you have to use a lot of glue and sticks. And you know, the original mohawks from Native Americans who used it to look tough in battle, they used to use feathers, you know, to hold, because you have to do something to hold it rigid up like that. So, and you know, the whole punk thing was kind of like a rebellion, you know, rebelling against something. So I thought, okay, she got the look from Callisto. It's the 80s. People had mohawks, not much in New York, mostly in London, you know, a little bit in New York. So what is she rebelling against? And then I had her power basically rebel against her. She no longer controls her power. She's an ethical person. So she can't lead the X-Men if she can't use her power. But it also kind of, during the course of the story, she realizes she can lead without her powers. And then that dovetails into Chris's next few issues on the book, where Forge takes away her powers. So it fits right in that spot. And that was the assignment. I was given a few issues of X-Men, and they said, do a story that could take place between these two panels, you know? So I had Kitty, who's furious at Storm for a fashion change in the way only a 13-year, she's like 13.
Yeah.
Only a 13-year-old girl can be mad if her best friend goes and gets a fashion change, you know? And Rogue has just joined the team, and she was a member of the Brotherhood, raised by Mystique. So it's kind of like think of your own family. Imagine letting your mortal enemy into your own home to have, like, to sleep in your house and have dinner with you, and you see them every morning. I mean, it just was weird, you know? So I was able to explore that too. And so it turned into a fun series that really is just inspired by Chris Claremont. You know, it's all there in Chris's books. Chris wrote, you know, soap operas. He wrote operatic soap operas. And you can take any issue Chris wrote and say, because he threw a lot of stuff out there. And you can say, wait, he dropped that thread and he dropped that thread and he never tied up that thread. You can run off of Chris's excess creativity, So that was that assignment. And then the Captain Marvel really was just I was a fan of Kelly Sue DeConnick and how she turned Captain Marvel into something that the Carol Court, that young brought a lot of female fans into comics. And we all know that we're very, very happy to have lots of female fans in comics now, because back when I was writing comics in the 80s, there weren't a lot of girls at Comic-Cons. And when Kelly Sue did, and a couple other books too, of course, but when Kelly Sue did, turned Carol Danvers into this like powerhouse and she wrote stories that female readers liked. I remember I went to a Comic-Con in like 2012 or something, and I was like, this convention floor is half filled with women, and I hadn't seen that, so so it really was inspired by and then Sarah Brunstead, I'm probably going to say her name wrong too, she sent me Kelly Thompson's work. And Kelly Thompson had turned her into this just like hilarious, it was no longer like the brooding alcoholic, warbird binary history. It was this like tough chick who, made jokes and had fun. So right there, I knew I would be able to do something fun. So, and then of course, once you get the character, she's the mightiest superhero in the Marvel universe today, at least. I don't know about next week or the week before, but so it had to have a space opera epic to it, so she gets sucked into a Tesseract pocket, a wormhole, and ends up on another planet. But what happens is that she drags a bunch of normal street kids with her who were like, we're not down with superheroes. We're not down with you. We're not down with you schooling us. And we didn't want to go to, into so it's a lot of fun. And I was able to kind of create a new bunch of villains, and including a legacy villain, Nitro.
Yeah.
And the way that fits in there is the original Nitro killed the original Captain Marvel.
Yeah, he's the one who put the toxin, gave him the cancer, right?
Yes, gave him cancer. So, and I didn't even know that. I didn't know, I mean, I knew Jim Starlin's Death of Captain Marvel was one of the very first graphic novels that Marvel did. But it was really one of those things where I was like, can I use this character? Can I use this character? And it's always like, well, no, they're off in the negative land. Oh no, they're off on the, and they're over there, they've just been overused. They've been used too much. I did one of those things where I just Googled like old Marvel villains no one cares about. And there are all these like really goofy villains. And then suddenly there's Nitro. And I'm like, a dude who gets mad and explodes. That feels to me like very modern.
Yeah. Yeah.
We like all of us, how much of your day is taken up with, did you fill out that form? Did you file that? Did you check? Did you update this? Did you read, like so to me, it felt very modern to suddenly to have a character who gets mad and explodes. And he hooks up with a young girl whose idea is that technology, the promise of technology was to take away all the mundane, meaningless tasks that humans don't want to do. And instead, it seems to have added more meaningless tasks that we have to do just to stay on top of keeping our tech from melting down and crashing. And also now with AI writing books and making paintings and making music, it's like, wait a minute, you were supposed to free us up so we could make music and paintings and but instead you're taking the cool jobs away from us. You're not taking the boring jobs away from us. So Nitro hooks up with this Nada, who's this young fashion designer chick who's just like, look, the promise of tech, it failed us. So let's smash it. So that's the sort of premise for the Captain Marvel book.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the continuation of that. I like Robert. I think he's a good character, and like I'll remember this for. I didn't know how Marvel died initially, right? I just knew he died. I was when Thanos came into the MCU, I wanted to learn all about Thanos, right? And so I was reading a lot of the Thanos centered titles, and I had no idea cancer was a part of the narrative, and I'll never forget reading that ever, because I read it like right after my uncle died, and my uncle died of cancer. And like, man, I've had comics hit me hard before, but like when something's that fresh and you're not expecting it, right? And it's just like, I remember like weeping, and I was just like, it was so sad. But even his death, like it was really well done. And like Thanos visits him at the end, and it was kind of this like really beautiful scene that you didn't expect. And so, yeah, to have him like back now, and then, and also like, I may be one of the few, but like I'm a big fan of Civil War, right? And he was also the cataclysm of like of Civil War, or the catalyst of Civil War. And like, he blew up and killed all those kids, and that's what starts like the Registration Act and everything. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, like, and we're seeing him in a different way, and he's older, he's aggravated, like, life's not treating him well. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see what you do with these. I'm always excited to see what you do with any character, honestly, because you're but like, you've given yourself like a wealth of options now, and it's like, I can't, I read a lot of comic books, and I have no idea where you're going. Just like the end of this second issue of Storm, like, I knew there was drama bubbling, but I didn't expect Storm to walk off, and Wolverine is like stepping up to the plate, right? And like you mentioned, it's gonna be messy. He's not a chess player. He's an angry little man
he's a loner. He doesn't want to lead anybody.
Yeah.
So,
at least not yet. I mean, he does. He changed. Like, the Wolverine now is different than the Wolverine then. But yeah, it's really cool to see you to see you go back in time and celebrate this like Claremontian history, right? Which I mean, everyone should, because the roads that he paved to where we're at now is, like, comic books owe so much to him and his ideas and creations and plot points.
These throwback comics are interesting in that, that I'm not, it's hard for fans to understand why read them, because they happened a long time ago, but they're basically saying, there was more going on there than you knew about. So it's like, and then it also projects into the future. Like, Storm is wondering, if I don't have my powers, I do have this supposed sorceress lineage. Maybe I can like tap into that, So it's kind of like, I can't really, I don't know. I think that they're for Claremont fans. They're for deep historians. They're definitely like throwback comics in some way. but I really enjoyed doing it, and then switching over to Captain Marvel, which is real time. And
Mhm.
there's also a lot of weird stuff when you have to telescope time, because Kitty's 13 in the story I wrote. She's by now, that was almost 40 years ago. So she's not 53.
Yeah.
She's maybe 18, 19. So you have to figure every decade of Marvel stories, people age 1 year.
It's like they like age in like opposite of dog years, kind of, right?
Exactly, opposite dog years, but not even that much, like not even 7 years. It's more like a decade, I would think. So, and then there are other characters that are timelessly old, like Mystique and Logan are ancient.
Hmm.
They've established that they go way, way, way back. Captain America is another one. He fought in World War II. So some characters seem to, the aging process doesn't matter, and other characters it's the slow aging. And then there are other characters like Spider-Man. For years it was like he can't graduate high school. And then finally people were like, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe like he could get married to Mary Jane. But it's a difficult question, because they have to age and not age. And the fun for me was, I looked at some of the current X-Men books, and I saw how she's now Kate Pride,
Hmm.
how mature Kate Pride is. She's so mature, and it was fun to say, well, back then she was like a brat. So I get to write her like a brat.
Yeah, that's like the old iconic panel, like, you're a jerk, Professor X, like you're like back to the good
Yeah,
old days.
back to those days where she's like, you got a haircut without telling me. Yeah, well, I'm gonna go get a tattoo. you know
And change my hair too, and hang out with Rogue, who no one trusts right now.
Yeah, no one trusts. So it was really fun. She's doing anything she can do to get Storm's goat, because she's so pissed. And she doesn't understand that Storm is going through something that she can't tell anyone. And it becomes a little bit of a metaphor for, you know, as you move through life, you don't know. You buy buy something at a store, you don't know what that salesperson's going through.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're hiding, what misery they might be living. Maybe there's no misery, but it's sort of like the first couple issues, I wanted the X-Men to always be goofy and having fun, and let's go to the beach, and let's go to the swimming pool, let's hang out, and because they don't understand that one of the members of the X-Men is going through some heavy, heavy, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And the one person that she can talk to is Logan.
And he's not listening right now. He's like mad at the new love interest, and he's the grumpier. Well, like this isn't like the Wolf, like Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men, where like when Logan and Storm were together for a short time, which I actually really dug. I thought I loved them as a couple. Like,
I actually, and there's a certain amount of like flirting that goes on between them in this series, because I know they eventually got together. And even though famously Logan's real love was Jean Grey, there is also another tangent that the woman that he would have like really hung with the best would have been Storm. So I was able to do a little bit of flirting, even though technically they hadn't gotten together yet.
Yeah, you had a great line at the end of issue 2, where when he throws her new boyfriend, like when he basically like beats the shit out of this poor guy in the men's bathroom, like breaks the mirror with his body, and like and Storm catches him. But what is she says something, she's like she says like something, do you want this or do you want me? And I was like, oh, like you gave me chills, Annie. I was like, oh.
And also, I really like how Sid Kotian is, he's creating an atmosphere for each character. Like he really got it when we said, remember, this isn't Kate Pride. This is Kitty Pride. This is Kitty when she's like 13 years old. So when he had her run in the amusement park to this like mermaid ride, he created an environment for the reader to really go, oh yeah, she's a teenage girl who likes mermaids. You know, it's like, and then that bathroom scene, the way he uses the mirror to show sort of the brooding darkness of what's going to happen in that scene. I mean, and then issue 3, 4, and 5 are done by Geraldo Jorge, and we're having a blast because he's like, he's new to the field and he's trying all kinds of stuff, you know. So we're having a lot of fun on the next 3.
So is Storm going to be a 5-issue mini or 6 or
5-issue mini, and the Captain Marvel is 5 issues because then Kelly Thompson did this like spectacular 50-issue run or something.
Yeah.
And when she decided to leave the book, the next writer wasn't ready yet, you know, because sometimes you're like, well, I'm already writing 2 books, but can you hold the book till September? So Sarah called me and said, can you do a bridge comic that moves Captain Marvel further in time and at the same time sets up the next writer? So Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers lives in Harpswell, Maine, and I really know Maine well. I know lobstermen. I know how they talk. I know how tough they are. I know how they come together for each other because they're like, if one man's boat is sinking, you have to bail him out because it could be your boat the next day that's sinking. So I had a lot of fun, and that was really what hooked me. When Sarah said, I said, well, where does she live? And she says, well, New York and Maine. And I went, New York and Maine? I love Maine, you know? So that was fun. You get to do a little bit of the patois. I mean, it's fun to be able to do Rogue. You know, you get to do a little bit of Southern Girl patois.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't keep it up. I can't keep it up because I'm not a Southern girl. You know, so I was like, all right, let me stretch a little and come up with a little bit of sassy Southern Girl stuff. But you know, I couldn't keep it up for years. That's for sure. You know.
Real quick, I want to shout out, E-Man, thanks for tuning in. Villains Unite. God loves the villains. Gotta love it. I love the scope of Captain Marvel. I love that when she's talking to Tony and she's like, "Oh, I saved the world already today," and he's like, "What'd you do?" And she's like, "Oh, I pulled a boat out of the water," and he's like, "That's not the world." And she was like, "No, those boats are the world to the fisherman who owns it." But I love that. I love that we go all the way, like, you know, past, you know, from outer space down, you know, to a coastal town, where, you know, she goes out on a boat in a storm and pulls off this rescue without using her powers, and then you know, and then is back out in outer space, and then is back down trying to talk to these asshole kids. Like, these kids are jerks. I don't like, you write temperamental youth so well, like thinking about how angry Kitty is, and this like this whole defeatist deal of like them being like, well, we don't need AI, we don't need anything, like the world's ending, climate, like we might as well just sit here and die.
What's funny is that, you know, the young people in my life say things like that to me. They're like, why bother getting a career? Why bother doing anything at all? The world's ending, you know, and it's very hard. They're not wrong, you know, so it's very hard to answer those questions. And so what Captain Marvel does is she talks to them, but normally she would just walk out of the room after that, and the kids it would have an impact on them or not, who knows. But when they get swept up in adventure together, she's able to show them how, even if the world is ending, like, make today great. And if you make today great, tomorrow will be great. You know, so it's really like an anti-depression comic. You know, it's like don't give in to the depression that, oh, you know, the boomers already, climate change, the boomers, AI, you know, it's over for us. Why make kids? It's kind of like that's the very reason to get up the next day and do something.
Yeah. You deal with a lot of notions like that very well in your narratives, like, you know, thinking about, like, you know, storms, confusion, and depression, you know, dealing with you know, depression and anxiety, and that sense of loss is very you know, pertinent in Seeds, right? Because that's kind of,
Yeah.
Seeds has the same deal. Why would you bring a child into this world also when the child's father is an alien, and there's a lot of other moving parts going on too, right? But even looking back at, like, your Daredevil run, which at the time that you were writing it, you know, like, for you to bring in, like, drug dealers and sex workers, and really deal with, like, the anguish of mental illness, and like how Karen has to deal with Matt, you know, being, you know, like, I loved the I love the juxtaposition of, like, how in love she is with him and how terrified she is of him when he has the mask on. Like, when she talks about his hands and how they caress her, but then he makes them into fists and causes so much pain, and like her as a partner, and like how you deal with that. And she can't talk to anybody about it too, right? Like, it's all claustrophobic. She has to keep it all inside, or risk Matt's safety and his secret identity, and everything, you know. And
you got to figure that she's the one washing the blood off the uniforms.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think he can bring his bloody Daredevil outfits to the laundromat, even though that would make for a funny scene. That would be like a good Chip Zdarsky. Or, you know, Mark Waid, who wrote the character with so much humor.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, that scene could fit somewhere. But yeah, and it's like what we were saying about Rogue. Like, you know, okay, so the X-Men took in Rogue. What does that mean? The X-Men took in Rogue. They took in one of their arch enemies, you know. So it's like, it's fun to take these anomalies and somehow make them work. They don't trust her, but who's nice to her? Kitty. Kitty's nice to her because Kitty's 13 and Rogue likes to party, you know. And her boyfriend, her kind of inappropriate boyfriend, because Peter would have been like 18, 19, like a little too old for her, is fresh from the former Soviet Union. He's you know, he's kind of a stiff. Literally, his powers make him a stiff, you know. Like, so of course she wants to hang out with Rogue, you know.
Yeah, she's like the cool older sister, and a magnet to her, you know, her rebellion against Storm and all this too. It's so cool, like, how you can bring all, you know, superheroes. You know, a lot of people, and I think they're very incorrect, and it's my show, so I can say that, but like, a lot of people get mad when we humanize these characters, right? And when we showcase their vulnerability, I always do this, I say we, like I'm making these comics with you, but when you all, like, showcase their vulnerabilities and their weaknesses, and, you know, like how Tom King beat Batman down every issue, but it was about how Bruce Wayne picks himself back up. That's the superpower and money. But, you know, like, when everything is against you and everything's weighing on your shoulders, and when you have to pick yourself off the ground with that kind of weight on you, and still do the right thing, and still strive for justice, and, you know, it
in a weird way, even that's human. I mean, if you think of your friends, like, I have friends that no matter what hits them, they get back up.
Yeah.
You know, and I have other friends who, you know, I got to call every day to try and lure them off their video games and out of bed, you know. And they're like, "Oh, Annie, come over and play video games and eat donuts with me." And I'm like, "No, we're not going to eat donuts and watch video games. I'm going to make you go out with me to look at some art or go swimming, or, you know." So, you know, there's a whole range of humans. So I mean, the Peter Parker really was the first, where, you know, Steve Ditko and Stan Lee were like, you know, half the comic has to be him being an ordinary teenager who has a science project due and has to get the groceries to Aunt May and has to, you know, fight the vulture in between, you know. I was able to do this one story with Rick Leonardi where he's sort of like, he sees a kid, he sees the collateral damage of a kid dying, and he goes to Thanos and says, you got to give this kid his life back again. So he's having a fight with Thanos to try and like fight death, but on his mind it's just, oh my God, Aunt May's having a barbecue tonight and I'm the one who has barbecue sauce. You know, I mean, this is human shit, right?
Yeah.
This is like,
but not every writer like pulls it off so well. And I think that's one of your strengths. And I think that's why, the other day I got to interview Saladin Ahmed and David Mack was on the other day and I love Daredevil. Right. And so I asked them like, what are these like, what are these like big time Daredevil runs? Or I asked Saladin like what research he did to get ready to write Daredevil. Everybody still mentions you with like the highest regard, and they're like, like Annie's run is one of like the most like human Daredevil and like something that's like rich with exploration and it's still pertinent to today, right? And
well, that's sweet. And it was weird because when I first got the assignment from Ralph Macchio, I guess he assigned a bunch of fill-ins, and I thought I was just doing a fill-in, because I wasn't ready for big time yet. And what Ralph is kind of sneaky, what Ralph was doing was he was assigning a bunch of fill-ins to see who he wanted to take over the book.
Oh.
So I did a fill-in issue with Barry Windsor Smith and had the Black Widow in it. It was like just a fun one issue thing. And then Ralph said, okay, you won the competition. I didn't even know I was in a competition. I think one of the things that I did was I was much more interested in villains than in heroes, because for whatever reason, I was right out of college. I was like 20 years old or however old I was. I was sort of curious about villains. And so my run was like weird villain after weird villain, like Rot Gut, like they were all creepy. And then at some point, Ralph was like, okay, you keep focusing your comic on yet another weird villain. You've got to face Matt, you've got to deal with Matt. And that's when John Romita and I came up with Typhoid Mary, because we're like, Matt's two people. Why don't we have a character that is seducing the two different sides of him? And that is how I ended up finding Daredevil. I found Daredevil through Typhoid Mary.
Wow.
How like Mary knew how to get Matt. Matt was the guy, like Matt, I think, had just defended a kid who was blinded by a chemical company. She knew how to get Matt. And Typhoid knew how to get Daredevil. And that was based on the fact that Daredevil has a history of kind of very disturbing girlfriends.
Yeah. I love that about Matt. I love that like women are one of his like greatest weaknesses.
Like Karen Page is a junkie. Karen Page has pimps. Karen Page will always turn back to the street and be maybe not now that she's an adult and she, the TV show, she certainly wasn't. I don't even know if they got into the fact that she was a streetwalker, but, Elektra was nuts. And so you take your cues from previous writers, and the previous writers said, Matt's got some funky taste in women.
Now, didn't you base a little bit like maybe maybe it was Mary's looks. But
Well, that
didn't
was
you
Johnny. That was John Romita.
his like ex-girlfriend or something? Like,
Yeah, John Romita Jr. When I first came up with the idea for Typhoid, which really was really Ralph Macchio saying, now I want you to make a villain that amplifies who Daredevil is. And because, like my editors at Marvel are great. Mark Basso and Sarah Brunstad, they're amazing. It's like they know just when to step in and say, what does this mean? And, so Ralph inspired me to do that. And I sent the description of the villain to Johnny, and they were going to a party, him and his girlfriend, and his girlfriend stepped out of the bathroom dressed like Typhoid Mary. And he looked at her and he's like, what are you wearing? And then he was like, wait a minute, let me draw what you're wearing. Johnny was one of the best collaborators ever. There's this, we just ran into each other at a convention, and he reminded me that he had an idea, Daredevil's dressed like a devil. Why don't we have him meet the devil? And that's where A Beer with the Devil came about.
Okay.
That's where that story came from. Although I think Johnny was like, he's dressed as the devil. Why don't we have him meet God? And I was like, well, how about the devil? Because God, I don't really want to write God.
Yeah.
God is like,
they're boring.
God is boring,
I get it. I get you.
Let me genuflect. I got to genuflect now. I said God is boring.
I know the kid who was raised Catholic in me is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've always loved Daredevil, is because I was, when my dad promised, my mom's family was real religious, and when my mom and dad got married, he made a promise to my grandma, and he was like, I'll do whatever I can. I'll put the kids in private school, right? And that was like one of he made this promise to my grandma, and he kept it. We were private school kids, and I guess I ended up okay, and I went to college and stuff, but it's not like it was the best education. And then when I went to high school, like I went to a college for my first 2 years. I went to college prep school that was like all guys, and my dad wanted me to play football, and instead I found drugs and started partying. And because like all these kids had tons of money, like they were like crazy money. All these kids are driving Audis and BMWs,
look what football look what it ended up doing. It's sort of like football gave people so many injuries and a lot of pain at the end of their lives. Sure, you get the cash up front. It's funny, the NFL once asked Marvel if they would do a comic book, and I think it was called Super Pro.
Yeah, I got a buddy who's obsessed with it.
Super Pro. So the first writer they asked to work on it was me. And so I studied football, because I wasn't a football player, but I studied because every issue had to have a game. And, I played a little bit of football as a kid, but and then I started reading about like how much pain football players are in.
Yeah.
And then I started to read about the percentage of football players that have brain damage or permanent pain, and then the percentage of them that are alcoholics. So my first issue, I cut between this exciting football game where this guy that was jacked up, the equivalent of steroids or whatever, and was winning the game. And I just kept cutting to this dude in a bar who was in so much pain. He was an alcoholic. And what happened was they sent the first issue to the NFL, I guess it was, and they went, you gotta be kidding.
Oh no.
And they just ripped the comic up and were like, let's start over here.
Oh no, you got too real. You got
too real. And whereas like Ralph Macchio would let me put real stories in Daredevil, it was a whole nother ball game to mess with that kind of, valuable intellectual property and, all that stuff. So Yeah, so they just didn't let me do it.
Well, jokes on them, because I bet someone looking back and maybe been like, maybe that wasn't the tone we were going for, but like to have your name on that cover might have made that series wildly different than the,
Yeah, no,
than the kind of joke it is today.
I think it's a good thing I got fired, but
Now when you're, you know, at that time when you were writing Daredevil and you were getting like, you know, more, you know, dealing with harder, grittier like issues than, you know, than I think a lot of comics then were doing, and focusing more like on like this human nature, which I continue, which is still very much like your vibe in the new stuff you write, you know, because it's you very much see it that like without drama and trauma, like these characters it doesn't matter how great the splash page is, it doesn't matter like how great they beat the villain and stuff, you know, it's just like there has to be something behind that. There has to be like layers and complexity to remind us, you know, that these people break and have faults and aren't always perfect. But did anyone ever like push against you while you were doing Daredevil? Were they like, I don't know if people are ready for this, Annie? Like,
no. I mean, with Ralph, I had the best editor. I mean, Ralph was just, he kind of let me do whatever I wanted, and it was towards the end of my run. There's something happens after you've been on a book for 4 or 5 years, or however long I was on a book. You need to get off the book. Mm-hmm. You need to do something else. But there's this momentum and you just keep going. And I think at the very end of my run, I didn't want to be writing Daredevil anymore. And then I started doing some stuff, like I got him involved with some, what would be the equivalent, you know, with these like street activists, what would be the equivalent of like Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like it was a black girl and he was starting to help her. And I kind of knew that Matt's next girlfriend was going to be this black girl. And I don't think Marvel was really ready for that either.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. And so, you know, then you just kind of mutually end your run. You both agree that's enough, you know.
Yeah. Did you kind of get the feeling like when you were writing all this, or like after when you left, like did you know that like, you know, decades later they were still going to be talking about this run, and that like that new, I like Chip Zdarsky, like you're a huge, he's told countless interviews that you were a huge inspiration to his run. And then like I said, like I've gotten lucky and talked to a handful of Daredevil creators lately, mm-hmm. and everybody mentions you and how like
that's very sweet.
You get the Matt.
But I think, you know, I have huge admiration for all of them too. You know, I think that, you know, I love Chip's work. I love David Mack's work. I love, who's the other name you said?
Saladin.
Yes,
he did Miles Morales. Yeah.
Tom King. I mean, Tom King's a master, you know, and it's funny because I'm up for 2 Eisners this year. And one of them is a collection of Moon Knight, Black, White, and Blood.
Yeah.
And, you know, everybody's all excited. Oh, we're up for an Eisner. And I'm like, we're up against Tom King. King's Batman. Like, we're not getting that award.
It's still got to feel a little good to get nominated though. Are you going to go? Like, are you going to go out there next week?
They offered to fly me out, but it's just funny because I was nominated for an Eisner Award when I was writing Daredevil, and it was for me, John Romita Jr. and Al Williamson. It was for the whole team because Al Williamson, of course, was like the god of inkers. You know, him and Klaus Janson were like the best inkers, and you know there were of course many others like Terry Austin, but it was that team of John Romita Jr. and Al Williamson was spectacular. So, and in the Eisners had just started. There were only it was like year 2 of the Eisners.
Oh, wow.
And our Daredevil was nominated. And at the time we were like, yeah, what are the Eisners? I don't even know what they are. I like Will Eisner's work. You know, and we lost to Alan Moore.
Whoa.
And it was sort of like, well, of course we lost to Alan Moore, you know, we lost to his like Swamp Thing or something. And then so then I wasn't nominated for another Eisner, even though we kind of thought the Seeds might have been. But the problem with the Seeds was that we started it before the pandemic in 2018.
Yeah.
And didn't finish it until after the pandemic. And so there was no year to hang the Seeds on. So I thought, okay, that's it. I'll never get nominated again. And then we got nominated, and but I'm just like, nah, up against Tom King. I don't think we're gonna win this one.
Yeah, I remember that weirdness with the Seeds, because it like the final 2 issues came out. Just the Dark Horse just released the trade, right? And
because the pandemic hit, and I think they were being printed. I forget where it was something to do with there was no paper coming out of Canada.
Yeah.
Remember the paper? We had a paper.
Yeah, the papers.
shortage.
Yeah.
And I think wherever it was being printed, China or wherever it was being printed, like there were so many problems during the pandemic that by the time we had the 3rd and 4th issue, we had to hold the 3rd and 4th issue because of pandemic problems. And then Dark Horse just said, look, let's just put out, because it was always supposed to be a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, we can't afford this. We can't afford to put out 2 more floppies and then the graphic novel. So we went straight to graphic novel. And it's interesting. There feels like there's a trend now for people to go straight to graphic novel, because
I love it.
Because a lot of readers, like, I love that people that like my work are buying Captain Marvel and Storm, but I know that a lot of them are going to wait until it's a trade.
Mm-hmm.
Like why buy 5 floppies when you can get them all in a book?
Especially when it's announced as a mini series, right? I mean, like it would be different if you were like writing like longer form arcs, right? Like, because if it's like, okay, if Annie's writing maybe 20 30 issues of a new series, then yeah, maybe I don't want to wait for the trades. Like, maybe I want to be on board. But if like it's going to be 5 or 6 issues, and in a handful of months you can pick up the trade, I kind of get that. I still remember, so like I was like new to press when Seeds was coming out, and it blew my mind. And I was doing my first like end of the year like Blake's Top Comics deal, which everybody's supposed to do, and no one tells you how stressful it is until you try and like take like a whole year of amazing reads and condense them into 10. And I wanted Seeds to be a part of it, but I hadn't gotten to finish it yet. And when they announced it, or when it released, but it didn't release, usually things come out digitally and physically the same day. But this, like, Dark Horse put out the physical trade, and then the digital trade wasn't going to come out until like after January or something. And
it's because, honestly, indie comics don't make much money.
Yeah.
So they have to, they're not, Dark Horse isn't Marvel or DC. They have to figure out, they don't want everyone going right to digital.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what the thinking was behind it, because I'm not on staff there, but I would imagine that there's, they're the little guy, even though they're number 3, probably. It's still always like shaky. Comic book companies are always in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially right now. It's weird right now.
Really in trouble. And then the other weird thing is that in doing the 5-issue format for Captain Marvel and Storm, I have to build in last page cliffhangers. So last page cliffhangers you have to do with a floppy. But even though they're all going to be collected together, you have to reestablish powers. You have to reiterate what the story is about. You have to end with a cliffhanger, which I'm sure once it's a trade will get annoying. Oh, she's reestablishing the power. Oh, she's reiterating what the story is. It's like things that you have to do when somebody waited a month for the next issue.
Yeah.
Become odd when they're reading the whole thing through.
Yeah.
know? So but that's the game.
Yeah, it's just how the medium's formatted. But it was still David Aha saw me like bummed that like I couldn't get a copy of the trade to cover in time to do my final show. And so like this he DM'd me on Twitter and I get this DM from David Aha and I was like, what is happening? Right? I was like, what is going? And I opened it up and he sent me a link to the PDF and he was like, hey, you didn't get this from me, but it'd be great if you would cover it. And it was like, it was so cool. I was like, that was like one of my first, like, you're a comic press. Like you're not just a nerd who reads comics. Like you're like part of this community. And that
because the system is that if you sign up to do an indie comic, and even though Dark Horse has done big stuff, like didn't they do Walking Dead and they have and Hellboy and
yeah.
they're not Marvel and DC. And then the other thing that happened that is a little bit just when social media started, the comic book companies put more and more pressure on us creators to promote our books.
Mm.
So we have to go out and shill and shill and shill and shill because, you know, in the old days, they'd buy ads. You know, they buy ads. Nobody buys ads anymore, you know, so you have to, and, you know, I've talked to people at the top, the people that are really, you know, doing big books and making a lot of money. They hire an assistant to just promote them. And, you know, and I remember I didn't even know this was going on, but it was like you had mentioned Katana. I think I was like, Katana was like not selling. Nobody was buying it. And I was at some con and some girl said, well, who's your social media? And I went, what? And she goes, oh yeah, everybody hires a social media person to do all that stuff for them. And I was like, I didn't know that, you know?
Yeah, that's what I do now. I quit my day job. Well, I quit my day job because I had a panic attack at work and I was working from home. Because we used to work in an office, but we switched to, you know, because of the pandemic and everything, and then they just let us stay there. But I had a panic attack because I was like stressed out, and they put me on a new team, and I had a new boss, and I didn't know anybody, and it was very stressful, and I'd never had a panic attack before, right? And so I'm over when I was 36, right? So I was like, and I'm a big dude, I'm not super healthy, and I was like, oh, I'm having a heart attack. Like, you know, my dad has heart issues, my grandpa had heart issues. I was like, I've never, because, you know, that's the only thing I thought it could be. It was painful, it was scary, I felt like I couldn't breathe.
Panic attacks are very, very scary. They feel like heart attacks.
Yeah, and it was gnarly, and they told me I couldn't leave. They were like, you can take a break, but we need you back here. And I was like, what are you talking? I was like, I can't work right now. I'm like crying. Like, you know, I'm like, you know, we talk on the phone. I'm like, I can't talk on the phone like this. And so, you know, I talked to my family and I was just like, you know, I was like breaking down, having a panic attack. And everybody was like, Blake, we get it. Like, we'll help you. You know, no one needs that. So I quit my job and you know, I had enough. You know, I had a baby 401k, wasn't worth keeping. I cashed it out. It bought me like a month. A couple people told me they were like, you know what? Like, what if you put everything into your podcast? What if you like, what if this is your plan? What if this is like meant to happen? And now the podcast didn't really monetize, but what happened is everybody found out that like I can sell books and I'm a good hype machine. And so now like I'm a publicist for Invader Comics. I work for a production company, Metal Ninja Studios. I do their social media networking, and I do a lot of like I have a lot of clients now for Kickstarter that hire me to help like the month before and the month of the campaign, and so I've been living that freelance life, right? And it's but it is, yeah, it's totally normal, and a lot of people you know, don't realize how much harder it is. And, you know, when you do have to promote yourself, right? Because like the good thing about Kickstarter is like, yeah, everybody can make a comic, anybody can tell their story now, but there's a lot of weight that you have to carry to do all that yourself, right? And a lot of people don't realize the pressures of that. And
also it's very nobody wants to promote themselves. it feels like your ego's too fat, you know?
Right? Yeah, it feels
And
dirty.
so, like, and it's sort of like, I don't really want to go on social media and say, buy my stuff. That should be the publisher's job. But
Yeah.
the publishers, you know, they don't really do that anymore. They do it a little bit. But then now, what with, so I was using Twitter, you know, buy Storm, buy Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is a little easier because the Carol Corps, you know, there's like all the Carol Corps that she has.
They rally to her, yeah.
But then when Twitter started to get weird, you know, when Elon Musk just started to like mess with it, and now it doesn't really work anymore to promote stuff because something happened with the algorithms.
Yeah.
You don't even see, like, I don't see any of my friends' posts anymore. I don't know what happened, but you really like, okay, so if Twitter was where I promoted my work and Twitter is shit the bed, where do you go next? And so everybody's kind of waiting. Is it going to be Mastodon? Is it going to be Threads? Is it going to be Blue Sky? Like, which one is going, Discord? Which one is going to be the new one?
Yeah.
So right now we're at a point where it's very hard to promote stuff because, you know, and you as a promoter, what are you going to do?
Well, I'm posting everything 5 times to every platform I can right now, like, which is mind numbing. It's so not fun, but I mean, I'm getting paid for it, which makes it a little bit easier to do. But I mean, yeah, it's like, it's yeah, post to Twitter, post to Blue Sky, post to Facebook, post to multiple pages on Facebook or groups on Facebook. And now some people are saying like, oh, you should try Reddit. And like, but Reddit as a platform has a lot of like no promotion. Like they don't want people promoting on their platform. And so, yeah, it's been weird and nervous for me too. Cause like, yeah, my Twitter's where most of my followers are. And it's been scary, you know, because it's like I don't want to lose this platform, but like you said, it's weird and it's not working anymore.
It's not working anymore. It just doesn't seem to work, you know.
Yeah. It's funny.
I just realized that I have another thing at 5:30. So
okay, yeah. Well, I wanted to tell you one quick story. I'll let you go. The reason why I loved Captain Marvel so much is because when Bob is yelling at the AI doctors and the robots on the phone. The other day, my dad is almost deaf and he's on the phone trying to do the same thing, right? And this robot is trying to pitch him something. And I thought my dad was going to have another heart attack or something or pop a blood vessel. But he's screaming at the top of his lungs. He's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. And he's thinking he's talking to a person. And man, my sister and my mom, everybody's screaming. They're like, Dad, Jim, it's not a person. It's not a person. Just hang up. And so that happened in that book, and I was just like, oh my God, my dad's in a comic.
Well, it was a scene to give to him because he is, and I have always wondered, and I'm friends with Jim Starlin, who created Nitro, and I gotta ask him someday. Like I have a feeling the name Robert Hunter, you know, that Robert Hunter was the name of the Grateful Dead lyricist.
Oh.
So it's sort of like, I have no idea if there's a connection there. I got to ask Jim, but that's why when Nada, who's this fashion designer villainist, is like, nah, you know, you need an upgrade. You need a new look. I'm a fashion designer. I'm going to get you some new threads, you know. And he's like, what's wrong with my look? And she says, well, you kind of look like a roadie for the Grateful Dead, you know. And that is like a little, like, what do they call them? It's a Easter egg.
Oh, nice.
It's an Easter egg that I don't even know is true or not. But I asked Jim, did you name Nitro after the Grateful Dead? Because they were very popular in the 70s. And he's a 70s villain. So I still don't know yet. I have to ask him.
Oh, yeah. I hope I want to know too. That's super interesting. Annie, this was so cool to get to talk to you. Honestly, like I think you are a phenomenal writer, a phenomenal storyteller, and I love the history and culture and layers that you bring to any character that you script. honestly. Like, and I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. Real quick, I know you said you're kind of in between social medias. Like, is Twitter still the best place to follow you and keep track of you? Or
I'm Annie Nocenti on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
okay,
and I think, like most people, Twitter is where I find out what's going on in the universe and I do my promo. Facebook feels just like family to me. I mean, I don't really dump too much promotion on Facebook because it's more like, how's my niece doing with her horses, And then Instagram, I post weird things I see. Like Instagram is just kind of like, this is what I saw in the world today and I thought was cool. And it actually is usually fairly pathetic. Like, but I use Instagram as this weird little insight into what my brain is like, and very little promotion,
Nice. I like that. I'm pretty sure I follow you on Instagram. I'll have to double check. Well, I know you got something to do, so I will let you. I will set you free. Three Good Nerds says great discussion. Really enjoyed hearing from you. Same. Like, honestly, this is one of the cool podcaster moments that I am just always telling people I am a very lucky nerd, and I really am. Annie, I hope you have an awesome rest of the day. I can't wait to read more from Storm and Captain Marvel and whatever else you bring to the future. Everybody who tuned in, thank you so much. Remember, love more, hate less, read comics. We'll be back with more interviews later. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful day.
It's Blake's Buzz Live.